Syracuse Basketball has a vastly different but much improved front court for next season.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's episode, we're going over the Syracuse basketball front court and how it is significantly better than it was last season. We'll talk about the starters, the backups, and the main takeaways for this unit. It's got a lot of new faces in it, but again, it's much better than it was last year. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's first go through the projected starters for the Syracuse front court for next season. And starting at small forward, I believe it'll once again be Chris Bell. He is 6'7", and last year he started all 32 games for this team, playing just about nearly 30 minutes. It was 27 minutes a night last year. He averaged 12 points per game, 2 rebounds, and 1 assist. And he was second in the ACC in three-point percentage. It was 42%, and that was second in the conference. And his role is pretty simple for next year. Be the main sniper on the team. He is the best shooter on the team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is someone next year who should be at least 40% from three-point range. I mean, maybe he doesn't shoot 42%, but at the bare minimum, if he can shoot over 40%, because he has that capability, that is his projected role for next season. But nothing changes with Chris Bell as the starting small forward. I would like to see him improve his rebounding, and that's been one of the bugaboos of Chris Bell's career so far with Syracuse. He improved slightly from his freshman to sophomore year, but this is someone who just needs to contribute more rebounding the basketball. He averaged 2 rebounds at the small forward position last year. You'd like that to be at least 3, probably 4 rebounds per game. I would say if he had 4 rebounds a game next season, that would be a massive win for Syracuse, but at least improve by at least 1. So, go from 2 rebounds a game to 3 rebounds per game would be good for Chris Bell. And if he could also be a better defender, that wouldn't hurt either. But his main role, his main focus is shooting. And if he can shoot over 40% again from 3, Syracuse is in better shape. Not going to guarantee they win, but they're in better shape if he's leading the charge with the shooting. Now, starting at power forward, this is where we have our first change in the front court. Donnie Freeman, the number 6 overall recruit on the ESPN 100 list. He recently got his 5th star from another recruiting website, making that. Now, every single recruiting website has him as a 5-star overall recruit. He is a 6'9" power forward, and he is hyped up as someone that can score at all 3 levels of the floor. And he was also someone that is one of the top rebounders in his high school league. Donnie Freeman should have really, really high expectations. And by the way, for every new player that I am about to mention, they all have their own podcast, and I will leave a link to each one in the description below. Donnie Freeman should have very, very high expectations for next season, because 9 of the last 10 number 6 overall players have been one and done. You don't go one and done by not being very good. 7 of the top of those 10 were all conference at minimum. And by at minimum, I mean at least they made the all freshman team. All right. And 3 of them were all Americans. 3 of those guys were all Americans as freshmen. So Donnie Freeman, as the number 6 overall recruit in the country heading into next season, he might just be the best player on the team. That's not really a bad thing either if he is the best player on the team, because I think this team does have some pretty solid players. So if he's the best, Syracuse might be in good shape there. High expectations for Donnie Freeman as the starting or projected starting power forward for next season. We'll get to the backup forward for him on the next segment, Jyare Davis. But anyways, let's move on to the starting center. It is projected to be Eddie Lampkin, 6'11", 4-star transfer from Colorado. And I would like now to address the rumors that are going around online. There's no concrete report about it. I know what he did. He scrubbed social media. I know. I get it. And everyone's freaking out about it. And, you know, it would be nice if you still had it up, of course. But until anything is official, I'm not going to really comment too much on it. Okay? So as of right now, I still think that Eddie Lampkin is Eddie Lampkin as of right now is projected to be the starting center unless something changes. Unless he decides to decommit, which it's out there. That's it, though, with addressing it. He is a 4-star transfer from Colorado. And he averaged 10 points and 7 rebounds. And this is someone who is expected to play about 25 to 30 minutes a night and start every game that he is healthy. He is not an all ACC caliber center, but this is someone that can stabilize the position. If you can get, 8 and 5 out of him next year, I know it's not 10 and 7, but 8 and 5 from the center isn't necessarily terrible. Maybe slightly more rebounds, actually. But this is someone that is a pretty solid rebounder. I would like him, though, to be a better defender than he has been over the course of his entire career. He's never averaged more than a half block per game. So you're not getting great defense out of Eddie Lampkin. Solid piece. That's what he is, a solid stabilizing center for this team. Now, as far as the takeaways from the starters, before I get to the main takeaways at the end of the show, they got good size and they got a lot of scoring, which I think is good. And the scoring can come from a variety of levels. Eddie Lampkin's not going to give you that long range, but he's good in the post. You got Donnie Freeman, who I mentioned is all 3 levels, and Chris Bell is an elite sniper from 3-point range. So you're good on that regard. And you got the size to help the rebounding. They do lack a little bit of defense. Chris Bell is not a plus defender. Eddie Lampkin's not a plus defender. And Donnie Freeman hasn't proven anything yet. So while I do think he's going to be an elite player next year, I can't project him to necessarily be an elite defender. Sometimes being an elite defender is not always as transferable. So there's a little bit of lack of certainty on the defensive end from the projected starters. But we'll see come the backup segment that they do have some pretty solid defenders on the bench. So let's get to that. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn is a tool that I use all the time to find the latest job opportunities. LinkedIn isn't just a job board, though. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, it might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the streaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on today's show, we're going over the improved Syracuse basketball front court more in depth. We talked about the projected starting front court players for next season. At small forward, I have Chris Bell playing about 25 to 30 minutes. Donnie Freeman at the power forward position playing 25 to 30 minutes. And Eddie Lampkin 25 to 30 minutes as well as the starting center. Now it's time to get to the backups for the front court. And it is a tad thin, but as we'll get into the main takeaways, I don't actually think it's as thin as it might look. But there are two main reserves for the Syracuse basketball front court. The first of which we'll talk about is Jyare Davis, the 6'7", 4-star transfer from Delaware. This is someone who can play the 3 or the 4. He started all 32 games last year, and he played about 33 minutes a night with Delaware. And in those minutes, he obviously racked up solid stats. He was 17-8. He shot nearly 50% from the field, over 80% from the free throw line, all-conference player. But this is someone who is great from inside 15 to 17 feet. Once you start getting outside range, his efficiency goes way down. He was 26% from the three-point line last year. So this is not someone who you're bringing in to provide shooting. However, he projects to be a better defender than Chris Bell, and he's more athletic, I think, than Chris Bell. So he's almost, in a sense, the perfect backup for Bell because Bell is an elite shooter. Davis can't really shoot from three-point range, but he can do a lot of other things that Chris Bell can't. He's a better defender, better rebounder. He can score from more areas of the court. It's just the shooting that separates Bell from Davis. I expect Jyare Davis next season to play around 20 minutes per night. And I know you guys might be thinking that might be a little bit low, but at the same time, just for some perspective, Quadir Copeland, I know it's a different position, but Quadir Copeland last year as the sixth man played 22 minutes a game. And before Benny Williams, who is a power forward, was kicked off the team, he played about 17 minutes a night as a backup. So kind of splitting the difference, saying about 20 minutes a night for Jyare Davis as one of the main players on the front court off the bench. So that's that for Jyare Davis, his role for next season. And once again, I will have a link to each podcast for all the new players, that being Donnie Freeman, Eddie Lampkin, Jyare Davis. Those guys, they all have their own podcast. I'll leave a link in the description below. So that's Jyare Davis for you. Next up, let's go to Naheem McLeod, who projects to be the backup center for next season. He is 7'4". Last year, he started all 14 games that he played in and played about 15 minutes a night in those contests. He averaged 4 points and 4 rebounds and 2 blocks per game. Naheem McLeod, as I've mentioned before on this podcast, is not the greatest center in the world, right? I'm not going to sit here and try to compare him to Lou Alcindor or anything like that. That's not Naheem McLeod. I know he's 7'4" and people think he's got more upside, but he's been in college long enough to know what he is and what he isn't. So this is not really me picking on him. I think Naheem McLeod right now, in his current role, is absolutely perfect. The backup center that should play around 10 to 15 minutes a night, because that's what he did at Florida State. At Florida State, he was primarily used as a backup. I believe in his first year at Florida State, he started 5 of 18 games. And then in his second season with the Seminoles, he started 11 of 28 games. Naheem McLeod last year was the starter for every game he played in. So the fact that they got someone and then now he is the backup means that this is an improved front court by default, because you just improved the position. McLeod is now the projected backup. He can spot start. He can, right? If Eddie Lampkin misses a couple games here or there, Naheem McLeod can do a serviceable job. It's just he's not a full-time starting center. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Syracuse is not going to ask the same things out of Naheem McLeod as they did last season to be more than what he really is. He's a solid shot blocker inside because of his height at 7'4". He can score a little bit around the rim. He's about a 60% field goal percentage, which is pretty solid. And he can obviously rebound as well in the limited minutes. So he's not Eddie Lampkin's caliber, but he can do different things than Eddie Lampkin, and that's why he should have a role for next season, playing about 10 to 15 minutes as the backup center. He'll be healthier for next season. I think we'll see a better McLeod, especially because he is in the proper role for this team. So the two main backups for Syracuse basketball's front court next season are Jyare Davis, the four-star transfer from Delaware who can play both the 3 and the 4, and Naheem McLeod, who is a holdover from last year, was the starting center, but now projects to be the backup center. Started 14 games. I can't imagine he starts 14 games next season, barring any sort of injury, which we don't wish. So that is it for the backups for the Syracuse basketball front court. Now coming up, some of the main takeaways for this unit. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And Syracuse football fans, I know there are some of you that are watching or listening to this channel, and I know some of you guys are pretty optimistic about this team. I have them at 8-4. Some of you guys, though, have them at 10 wins. And if you have them winning that many games, I highly suggest you taking Syracuse to win the ACC outright at plus 4,500 right now on FanDuel, because you're already optimistic they're going to win double-digit games. You might as well try to cash in on winning the conference outright. I'm just saying, plus 4,500 is solid odds if you're that positive about this team. I have them at 8-4. You have them higher. Maybe you should take this bet. All you got to do is just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. On today's episode, we're going over the Syracuse basketball projected front court for next season. We went over the starters, we went over the backups, and now it's time to get to the main takeaways of this unit, which I think is significantly better than it was last year. I think the first takeaway for me is that this team has a really solid trio of forwards that can all do different things. Right? You got Chris Bell, who's the elite shooter on the team. You got Jyare Davis, who it could be one of the best reserve players in the conference next season. I wouldn't be surprised if he was in the running for the 6th man of the year. Very good from inside. He can rebound the basketball really well. He's a 50% shooter. He's a solid free throw shooter as well. Can play solid defense. Maybe not the defender like Malik Brown is, but still a very solid player. And then you got Donnie Freeman, who is arguably the most all-around player of that trio right there that I just mentioned. So you got a trio of forwards that can all do different things, and it should be one of the better forward units in the ACC. But there's a catch. They only have 3 of them. And some people are saying, you keep talking about a guard. They need a guard. Why not a forward? Why not a forward? Because they're kind of thin. To that I say, why not Chance Westry? Why not Westry? He's 6'6". He can easily play the 3. He can easily play the 3. Davis can play the 3 or the 4. Donnie is a 4. I think Chance Westry could play the 3 next season in spurts. you can use him there, especially if you bring in another guard. So Westry to me is the caveat. I think he can easily be in the front court or the back court. He's a very versatile player, and that's what kind of makes it all the more intriguing how Chance Westry is going to look next season for this team, because he can probably do so many different things if he can return to the player he once was built up to be in high school. Pretty simple. Next takeaway is Syracuse basketball right now does not have an elite center on its roster, but that's not necessarily terrible. I think they got two players that are very good for what they're going to be asked to do next season. Eddie Lampkin should be a starting caliber center for the Orange, a stabilizing force, can play 25 to 30 minutes. He doesn't have to be as good as what Jesse Edwards was a couple years ago. He doesn't have to be one of those all-time great Syracuse basketball centers. He doesn't have to be any of those guys. He doesn't. But can he give you 8 to 10 points? Can he give you 5 to 7 rebounds a night? He's a good passer, good distributor of the ball. That's what Eddie Lampkin has to do. Not be the best player in the world, just a solid player. And Naheem McLeod no longer really has to be a starting center. He can just be the backup. He can play solid defense. We don't have to worry about him doing more than what he really is, because we're not asking that. We're asking him to be what he was at Florida State, because he's a solid, capable backup center that can give you 4 points and 4 rebounds in 15 minutes a night. And he's a good defender because he's 7'4". So 2 okay centers, but they are both being asked to do what they are supposed to do. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. However, this is another takeaway of mine, and I've said this before on the podcast. I think they do need one more center. Does not have to be a big fish at all. Does not have to be a top 300 overall player in the transfer portal. They could even be a high school recruit. Just someone who can be a third body for this center group, because I just think they need one. And if they don't, it's not the end of the world. I would prioritize getting another forward, another guard over it. But it would be nice just to have that third string center on this team heading into next year. And finally, this front court's better than last year. And part of the reason for that is because the sizing of it is improved. Everyone has good size. Chris Bell, 6'7". Jyare Davis, 6'7". Donnie Freeman, 6'9". Naheem McLeod, 7'4". And Eddie Lampkin at 6'11". And even if you move Chance Westry in, if he's your smallest forward at 6'6", you're doing something right. Last year, I just felt that there wasn't enough size on this team. You had Malik Brown at one point being the starting center. Malik Brown is 6'8". He's not a starting center. He's 6'8". He's too small. You had Justin Taylor playing in the front court last year. And I know he was the same size basically as Chance Westry, but he was being asked to do a lot more because Syracuse just didn't have a lot of players in the front court. Chris Bell was still there, but he's not the biggest rebounder in the world. You just have a lot of size, and everyone feels like on this unit can be a contributor, whereas last year they were just thin. They didn't have much. When Naheem McLeod goes down, no more center on the roster. Benny Williams, you hoped would have taken a jump. He did not. This year, it just feels like there's not as much hope on the unit as there is more certainty. Certainty over hope, because there's just more you can look. You got the number 6 overall player in high school coming in, an all-conference player on the bench. Chris Bell's a solid shooter, and Eddie Lampkin is proven Power 5 center. There's more certainty with this unit. There's not as much you have to hope and pray, and, maybe they can be good, maybe they're not. So overall, this is a significantly improved front court compared to last season. So, folks, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you know right away when I'm dropping the next podcast. And as I've said throughout this show, I will leave a link to the Eddie Lampkin podcast, the Donnie Freeman podcast, and the Jyare Davis podcast, because they're all newcomers to this front court and they each have their own. So if you want to learn a little bit more about them rather than this brief summary that I gave about each player, check them out below. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And everyone, take care.